Take your Bibles, if you would, turn to Esther, chapter number 3. Esther is towards the middle of the Old Testament. If you're not familiar with that book, it's a great book. I will tell you the name of God never appears in the book, and yet He is all over that book, and we're going to talk about that this morning. But before we do, by means of introduction, as we continue in our series on big turning points in Scripture. And I'll tell you that this character today was not on my radar at all when I began thinking about, praying about this series, and then starting to study for the series. This was Monday morning when I began to ask the Lord, who are we going to look at this week, and why, and what, and all that good stuff. And this name was pulled out of Scripture, set before me by the Lord's Spirit, and was quickly confirmed. So I'm very excited about the part he will play in our series. But again, by means of introduction, let me point out that there are many factors that go into shaping the direction and outcome of our lives. A lot of things contribute to who we are and what we become, and at the end of the day, what our life looks like. Genetics plays a huge part in that we have really no control over initially, and then it's just harder and harder to resist and shape those genetics. They just play arguably a massive role in our lives. Our upbringing plays a big part in it. And we don't have a lot of control over that either. How our parents trained us, or how our parents didn't train us, or what parents we did or didn't have, what homes we grew up in, what school we went to, what religion we were subjected to. All these things, when we're young, they form who we are and how we think, and so they play a major role. Our education is a big part of that. Where we're educated, by whom, how whom. Culture, though, you can't deny the fact that culture is a massive influencer into how we think and what we decide to do and all those different things. But at the end of the day, none of those, I think, are the single most important factors, even though they're all big ones. At the end of the day, the single most important factor in what we do and who we become and where we end up in life, it comes down to our individual belief system. What we believe as individuals shapes and forms the majority of our decisions, which then shape and form our life and the direction of it. For example, just take one thing. Our treatment of people is determined by our belief system. How I treat you, how you treat me, is formed by my belief system forms how I treat you, yours forms how you treat me. If it is my belief that people are valuable, that people are precious, that they shouldn't be taken for granted, that their lives are more important than my life, then I will treat people with respect. I will treat people with grace. I'll treat people with courtesy. I'll treat people lovingly. It will shape my direction when it comes to people. But if I believe that people are dispensable and expendable and they don't matter and they exist, meaning you all exist for me. Thank you, by the way, for existing for me. If I believe that, and by the way, lots of people believe that, then they're going to treat you poorly. I'm going to treat you poorly if that's my view. That's just how we go. Now, furthermore, in this matter of treatment of people, if I believe, if in my belief system that there is a God in heaven and I will answer to that God in heaven, that will shape my decisions. I will think twice. I will be very careful when it comes to responding to a person who isn't so kind to me or treating a person unjustly. I will pause. I will hesitate because I know there's a God who watches and is recording, and I will answer to Him. Now, if I don't believe there's a God, and if I don't believe I'll ever stand before a higher power, a higher authority who has the authority to judge me and punish me, then you're in big trouble because I have no restraints. My belief system robs me of the restraints that I need to treat you properly. And so at the end of the day, no matter how I'm raised, no matter what my genetics are, no matter what culture I grow in, my individual belief system when it comes to people and God dictates and determines how I treat people. And you can look at anybody in your life, look at anybody on TV, and find out what their belief system is, and you'll kind of be able to predict why they're doing what they're doing, which is why when people make their way into my office for any counseling that involves relationships or personal issues, I don't just ask them about symptoms, they'll tell me what's going on, and then I'll ask inevitably, well, why did you do that? And what I'm trying to do is find out what they believe. I want to find out what they believe, because I can say, well, you shouldn't have done that, don't do that. But if they don't believe that they don't need to do that, or that they do need to do that, they're going to just defer and default back to that once the accountability session is over. A most obvious illustration of this, especially in our day and age, is if I get a chance to work with couples, I very quickly teach couples that men and women are divinely designed to be different. Huge. And if a couple does not believe that, or if one person in that marriage does not believe that men and women are different, they will not change their behavior. And maybe the best illustration of this is I tell ladies, I say, well, listen, your husband, by God's design, he thrives on being honored, by being respected. I know you love him, but he doesn't care about your love, actually. He wants to be respected. And I often see ladies look at me like, no, I don't believe that. Well, you don't have to. I'm just telling you. I'm a guy. I understand how it works, and I can show you in the Bible. But that's, if you don't believe that, then you are going to, for the rest of your marriage, struggle getting through to your husband. It's your belief system that I have to address, not your behavior, because your belief system forms your behavior, and I can only shape your behavior while you're in front of me. As soon as you leave, you'll do it what you believe to be right. Make sense? Fair? Belief system, at the end of the day, is at the heart of who you and I are. What do you believe when it comes to God? What do you believe when it comes to his son, Jesus Christ? What do you believe when it comes to the Bible? I deal with people all the time who they basically say to me, I like the Bible, but I don't believe the Bible. Well, then that's going to shape your life. If you don't believe the Bible, then why would you take it seriously? If you won't take it seriously, why would you make any changes to your life? And therefore, your life is shaped by your belief system. What do you believe about it? What do I believe about it? What do you believe about the U.S. government? Well, you're going to reveal your belief system, and that's going to determine what you're going to do moving forward. When I meet someone who doesn't pay their taxes, they say, well, the government, they abused it anyways. Your belief system that the government abuses it leads you not to pay your taxes. And by the way, they probably do, but I've never looked into it. Nor have you. We just say it because we often form belief systems ignorantly that lead to bad decisions that shape the rest of our life. Are you with me? Make sense? Hope so. Hope so. What do you believe when it comes to, say, divorce and remarriage? When it comes to drinking? All these very pertinent relevant issues in our life, our belief system will shape eventually what we do with them. That's why in the Bible teaching world, we say doctrine determines practice. What you believe determines what you will do. We have today an exciting Bible character. I wish I could pronounce his name perfectly, but I trip over it all the time, and we all say it a little different. But this hard to pronounce, powerful man in the Bible, he needed a turning point. He needed a moment in his life where he changed how and what he believed. Today is not about a man who was going in a terrible direction necessarily morally. It's not about a man who was steeped in pride and steeped in an ego and needed to be humbled and turned to God like we've looked at with Nebuchadnezzar and like we looked at last week with Manasseh. This is a man who seemingly was minding his own business, but he got himself into a bad belief system very quickly. And this belief system would shape his immediate life, which if God did not intervene, his outcome would not be pretty. This man started, though, with a bad belief system, which put him into a worse belief system. He, like most people in our world today who get a taste of power, as in most politicians today, had a belief that when you get power, you need to hold on to it at any cost. Which is why so many people today believe that once they get elected, that they'll do everything they can to hold on to that because that power deserves to be theirs, and therefore they'll compromise their ethics, they'll compromise their financials, they'll compromise their relationships, their reputation behind the scenes. When you believe in your heart that you deserve to have power and you should maintain and preserve that power at any cost, you will then believe any number of other dangerous beliefs, like people are expendable, or truth is irrelevant, or ethics aren't important, or everyone is out to get you. You ever meet somebody who believes that? They're out to get me. Like, who's they? And where are they? I don't know, but you know they're there. Do you have any proof? No, they're so good at hiding proof. Like, the beliefs that you get when you start going down that rabbit trail are dangerous. So let's see what the belief that power at any cost, this Persia first belief, led to in the life of Mr. King Ahasuerus. And you can say it however you want. That's how you're going to hear me say it all morning. All right, Esther chapter 3. Let's look at verse number 8. This is the great Persian king, 5 centuries. Did I say chapter 8? Chapter 3, verse 8. This is 5 centuries before Christ. He's in charge of 127 provinces. And he promoted a guy by the name of Haman. Oh, I always think of hangman when I think of Haman, right? If you know the story, that's what he would eventually be, is a man hanging. Verse number 8. And Haman said unto King Ahasuerus, there is a certain people scattered abroad and dispersed among the people in all the provinces of thy kingdom. Their laws are diverse from all people, neither keep the king's laws. Therefore, it is not for the king's profit to suffer them. If it please the king, let it be written that they may be destroyed. And I will pay 10,000 talents of silver to the hands of those that have the charge of the business to bring it into the king's treasuries. Well, it was a very persuasive opening statement by Hangman. And if you're not sure that, this belief system is that influential in our lives, look at what happens next. Verse number 10. I did mention the king believes that power should be preserved at any cost, right? Okay, so what does he do when he hears about, no evidence provided. He hears about a certain people, not name by name. There is zero evidence about who they are, what they do, but they're really dangerous for you, king. They could cause you a lot of harm. We got to destroy them, like kill every single one of them. Like, that's a pretty impressive recommendation. Verse 10. And the king took his ring from his hand and gave it unto Haman, the son of Hammedatha, the Agagite, the Jews' enemy. And the king said unto Haman, the silver is given to thee, the people also, to do with them as it seemeth good to thee. Hold on. I mean, if I was this king's servant and I knew he believed that power was everything, I would do this every day. I'd be like, hey, king, I just went down the street. There's a pizzeria there. The people who own it, no bueno. They're probably going to destroy you. I recommend you seize the pizzeria. Let's make it government-owned. The best thing to do is give me free pizza for the rest of my life. It's for your well-being. The king would be like, here's my seal. Whatever you like. I cannot lose my power. That's what happened. He just said to Haman, whatever it takes, spend as much money as you want, take as many soldiers as you want, kill them all. If they're a threat to my kingdom, kill them all. He didn't ask who they were, didn't ask where they came from, didn't ask what evidence he had, wasn't concerned a bit about them. In a second, in a heartbeat, he believed what Haman told him, and he became, in a heartbeat, listen, anti-Semitic. In a heartbeat. Verse number 12. Then were the king's scribes called on the 13th day of the first month, and there was written according to all that Haman had commanded unto the king's lieutenants and to the governors that were over every province and to the rulers of every people of every province according to the writing thereof, and to every people after their language. In the name of King Ahasuerus was it written and sealed with the king's ring. And the letters were sent by post, that's UPS of ancient days, into all the king's provinces to destroy, to kill, and to cause to perish all Jews, both young and old, little children and women, in one day, even upon the 13th day of the 12th month, which is the month Adar, and, a side note, to take the spoil of them for a prey. Wow. Why in the world would a king agree to such a massive decision in a moment of time? It would reduce his kingdom likely by millions of people, hundreds of thousands, surely. And every king wants as many people as possible. It could put him in a situation where people would, accuse him of being unethical or something, accuse him rightly of genocide. That may not put you in favor of the people, but hey, he's a strong, powerful king in a region where they don't mess around over there, so maybe he thought that'd be fine. But how does a guy decide in a moment of time to hand over his ring, which makes it irreversible in the law of the Persians, and put his name on it to kill a whole entire race in his kingdom? By having a belief system that my power is more important than anything in life. So a bad belief system, a self-centered belief system, led to believing another very, very dangerous belief, which in this case puts you on the wrong side of God. Genesis chapter 12. I bless anybody who blesses the Jews. I curse anybody who curses them. He believed something very quickly that put him on the wrong side of God. There's no evidence, at least I should say, that I can find, maybe a little bit that I could pull out that would in any way suggest that this king knew Jewish people. There's no evidence he went to Jerusalem. There's no evidence that he knew their history. He may have. There's no evidence, though, that he had ever experienced any problem with the Jewish people. In fact, the way that Haman introduces the Jewish people would tell me that he didn't have a lot of knowledge of them. He said, there is a certain people scattered abroad and dispersed among the people. A certain people. That means the king didn't really know this particular ethnic group in his kingdom. A certain people. If he knew who they were, he would have said that. They were Jewish people. So without any personal experience, without any legitimate education, without any confirmation of Haman's claims, the great king became a Jew hater in a matter of minutes, and only because of one man's statements and one man's beliefs. Wow. By the way, you should know that Haman played the king, and played him because of his baseline belief that his power needed to be preserved at any cost. And if you know the story of Esther, and I don't have the time to take you through it, but Haman hated the Jewish people. It was his belief system that they were the enemy. Haman hated them because a Jewish man by the name of Mordecai wouldn't bow to Haman, but it goes back further than that. He's an Agagite. And Agagites come from the king Agag. King Agag was the king of the Amalekites. The Amalekites were the ones that killed the Jewish stragglers in the wilderness and the ones that God sent Saul to go punish. And so there's a lot of history between the Amalekites and the Israelites. And here we are centuries later, and an Agagite doesn't like the Jewish people because of their history and because Mordecai won't disobey the law to bow down to a man. And so the Jewish man, the Jew-hating man, the anti-Semitic man, convinced the non-anti-Semitic man to become an anti-Semitic man in a matter of minutes. Wow. Ladies and gentlemen, I am your pastor and I love you dearly. You must know that people with wicked intentions in our world are trying to play us all. And they're trying to do to us what Haman did to Ahasuerus. And they're playing off of our political belief systems on both sides. The TV and the internet, YouTube, and all the different feeds you're getting through your social media pages, you're all opportunities. My best advice to you is find something better to do with your time, for what it's worth. Playing pickleball is better use of your time than combing through some of this stuff. Really, okay? I am shocked, I must say. I am shocked what has happened in our culture in a matter of months. Absolutely shocked. But it makes sense to me that we have believed certain things in our political prejudices that are being exploited to believe things that are very anti-biblical, very unwise, that will lead to further beliefs that will shape your life. Remember, the whole belief system shapes our life? When we believe bad things, it will result in bad decisions and bad behavior. And Ahasuerus believed a bad belief, fundamentally, politically, that was exploited by a bad man with a bad belief. That made Ahasuerus a bad person by means of belief system regarding the Jewish people. He quickly, within minutes, made an order that was irreversible to commit genocide. I would say that's bad. Fortunately for him, and this is the great news of the morning, God loves the Jewish people, and he would intervene, and the benefactor of God's intervention would be none other than King Ahasuerus. Without God's intervention, we would be putting Ahasuerus on the same plane and title as Adolf Hitler. But because God came into his life in a glorious way, he would have a tremendous turning point in his life. And although God's name is not mentioned today in our readings, it will be clear that God is behind the scenes, orchestrating, working things, not to control the king, not to make the king do what he wants him to do, but to open the king's eyes to the false belief that he has embraced so that he can change his belief system and therefore change his decisions. Turn to Esther chapter 2, one page backwards. I'm just going to give you a little bit of history before we read just a little bit of Esther chapter 2. Well before the plot to eradicate the Jewish people from his massive 127 province kingdom came about, the mighty king Ahasuerus, he decided to get himself a mighty queen. And she was so mighty that she decided to publicly defy the king. And the king says, hey, bring my pretty wife in here. I want to show everybody how pretty she is. Now, most ladies like that, I thought. Most ladies like their husbands saying to everyone else, my wife is the most prettiest woman in the world. But Vashti, her name is, she was not going to be marched around like a trophy wife, so she decided to defy the king. And that did not work out well for her. He banished her, and it did not work out for the king because he banished a beautiful woman, and he sat her in this palace and said, I miss looking at that beautiful woman. Season 2 of The Bachelor will begin on Monday. Get all the pretty women in the kingdom. And all these women come into the kingdom, and so they have this contest to find the king a new wife, a new queen. And there just so happens to be, just coincidentally, even though God's hand's not seen here by the naked eye, the spiritual forensics teams, they picked up his fingerprint, and his DNA is all over this. There just so happens to be in the capital where the king is. Well, let's read it. Verse number 2. Now in Shushan, the palace, not the capital, but like right there was a certain Jew whose name was Mordecai. Verse number 6, who had been carried away from Jerusalem with the captivity, which had been carried away with Jeconiah, the king of Judah, whom Nebuchadnezzar, the king of Babylon, had carried away. Verse 7. And he brought up this woman by the name of Hadassah. That is, we know her as Esther, his uncle's daughter. So that makes her his cousin. Much younger, evidently. For she had neither father nor mother. But here's a detail that the Bible puts in. It matters because we're dealing with a king who's looking for a wife. And the maid was fair. Nothing to do with like how she plays Uno or like that. Fair means, if you look in the Hebrew, I think it's hot. I think that's what it says there. Yeah. Our language today, like smoking hot, all right? That's Hebrew, all right, for what it's worth. The maid was fair and beautiful. All right. What's going on here? Verse 10. Esther had not showed her people nor her kindred, for Mordecai had charged her that she should not show it. That means Mordecai says, hey, girl, just let's not talk about the Jewish thing for a while, all right? And Esther just looks at him and says, okay, their stepdad, or I should say, adopted dad, you got it. Well, in verse 17, the king falls in love. And the king loved Esther above all the women. And she obtained grace and favor in his sight more than all the virgins, so that he set the royal crown upon her head and made her queen instead of Vashti. Verse 20 says, Esther had not yet showed her kindred nor her people, as Mordecai had charged her. So what just happened? Well, I'm going to give you three things. The first one's in this chapter. The first thing is God orchestrated a personal relationship, unbeknownst to the king, to help open his eyes. Oh, this is cool. This is really cool. To help the king eventually change his belief system about the Jewish people, God gave him a Jewish wife, a good-looking Jewish wife, after the king just experienced loneliness from losing a good-looking wife. In fact, the good-looking wife he lost was not a nice-behaving wife. She was evidently disrespectful. Evidently, she was defiant. And so the king wanted a new wife that would be a little more cordial, a little more kind to him. And he didn't look at her Ancestry.com report. He didn't care about her background. He just cared about whether she was good-looking and nice acting in the home. And he ends up with, of all the different available races, of all the different ethnicities, of all the people in his kingdom, he ends up with a Jewish woman. Not only did God give him a Jewish wife through his workings and orchestratings, but he gave him a seemingly kind and sweet wife. And why would that matter? Well, sometimes you don't appreciate what you had until you no longer have it. Right? When the AC goes out in summer, you're like, I gotta have it like now. We don't appreciate when we have it, but when it's gone, we realize what we had. And I think in Ahasuerus' situation, he had a wife who was challenging, who was difficult, who was just as strong as he was and would kind of go with him toe to toe. And when she was gone and when he got Esther, he just realized not every woman is like Vashti. I appreciate this different version, this Esther person. She's nicer and I value her because I was with Vashti. Ahasuerus may have believed Haman in his view of the Jews. But thanks to God, he has unknowingly been accruing personal experience now with a lovely, respectful, and courteous, and beautiful Jewish woman. I wonder this morning if you would join me in a little assessment, personal assessment. How is my belief system? What do I believe about God, about the Bible, about Jesus, about the Jewish people even, about my spouse, about my kids, about my pastor maybe, or about my boss or my coworkers? What is it I believe about any particular doctrine or conviction? What are my beliefs politically? Are they bad political beliefs? Are they good ones? Are they biblical ones? And really everything we're talking about today, you have a belief system on. You may have believed something bad about someone that isn't true. And you may be operating that way. And fortunately for us, God is in the business of helping us change our belief systems. And to help change perhaps a false belief about men, God may orchestrate bringing a good man into your life. Maybe you have a bad belief system about women, that all women are this and that. And that might be a bad belief system. And God may orchestrate to bring a woman into your life to rattle that bad belief system. You may have a particular belief system about Christians. All of them are hypocrites. Well, God may bring a Christian into your life that you can't find a hole in his story. You can't find any skeletons in his closet. They're there. We're all sinners. But God may orchestrate a blameless person who claims to be a Christian, put them in your life to shake up and to ultimately change your belief system. You may have a belief system about someone with a different background, a different culture, a different ethnicity that you just feel this way about. And God is in the business of shaping our lives and helping us to believe better. And he might bring somebody with that culture or that background or that ethnicity into your life to shake it up and to tell you you've been believing something you ought not to be believing, Turn to Esther chapter 6 with me if you would. Let's see what happens next in the story. I'm going to move a little bit faster for sake of time. But in Esther chapter 6, a lot has happened since the king got his new Jewish wife. Mordecai, Esther's adopted father, wouldn't bow to Haman. Of course, Haman gets upset. Haman wants to then destroy the Jews, which he convinced the king to do. Mordecai, this Jewish man, crawls to Esther's feet essentially by letter and say, hey, you need to go talk to your husband. You got to tell him what's happening. You're not going to be spared in all this. He'll find out you're Jewish. And she's hesitant, but finally she says, fine, but have everybody fast for me. Have everybody pray for me. And they do that. And she's about to go talk to the king, which is a big deal. Remember, this is the guy who cast his previous wife out because she wouldn't come during a feast. So she's a little nervous. The night before the big reveal, verse number 1, Esther chapter 6. On that night could not the king sleep. And he commanded to bring the book of records of the Chronicles, and they were read before the king. And you and I would do this. So in 2026, we couldn't sleep, so we pulled our smartphone over and we started, Googling something. Back then, it was, I can't sleep. Google, come read to me. It's a servant. And they would read these records, okay? And so verse number 2, this is what was found written in the records. That Mordecai, that's that Jewish guy, had told of Bigthana and Teresh, two of the king's chamberlains, the keepers of the door, who sought to lay hand on the king Ahasuerus. So if you're not sure what you just read, in the records, the Google servant reads that sometime before this night, a man by the name of Mordecai went and told the authorities that there were two servants of the king who were going to conspire to kill the king. And Mordecai saved the king's life by telling the authorities, and these guys got punished. Super ironic. The night before, Esther's going to ask the king to change his mind about killing all the Jews, because the king believed that Haman said all the Jews will destroy your kingdom and ruin your power. He's reading about a Jewish man who saved his life. Strange. Ironic. Well, the irony, verse 3, is the king asks the question. He says to Google servant, what honor and dignity hath been done to Mordecai for this? Then said Google, that ministered unto him, there is nothing done for him. And the hilarious part of the story is, at this point, Haman walks in. And the king says, hey, my trusted Haman, how are you, my man? Suppose there's a guy in the kingdom that I want to thank. And I want to honor him, and I want him to know how much I appreciate him. What would you recommend I do? And Haman, the Bible says, thinking, well, what other man would he want to honor but me? Well, king, I suggest you take your royal garments, give him to that man. I suggest you then put that man dressed in your royal garments on your horse. And then I would suggest that you make that man, who is me, certainly, to be paraded through the streets, and then you would have your finest servant say, this is the man that the king honors. And the king says, Haman, you're the bomb, diggity. Go do that to Mordecai. And Haman, who hates the Jews and who hates Mordecai in particular, all of his blood went to his feet, and they went from size 10 to size 14, and he just walked out of that palace devastated. And there he's walking, Mordecai, on the horse, on the king's horse, with the king's garments. Such is the man whom the king wants to honor. And he had to do this through the whole city. Wow, I love it. I love it. It's awesome. What happened here? Well, not only did God orchestrate behind the scenes a personal relationship with a beautiful Jewish kind woman that the king had enjoyed marriage to, but he also orchestrated a sleepless night with a particular reading in his ears that was totally about Jewish people protecting him and Jewish people taking care of him. Super weird, right? And yet nowhere in the Bible do we say God taking credit for this. But if you call him the spiritual forensics team, his DNA is all over this. He's orchestrating this. He is trying to help Ahasuerus change his belief system. Have you believed someone that you shouldn't have believed? I mean, you've been watching that particular person online or on cable TV, or maybe you've been looking at reels, or maybe you've been listening at the coffee shop to somebody, or maybe you've been doing your own study and a very prominent person writes a book, and have you believed something because of a title next to their name, or maybe because they have so many subscribers beneath their name, or maybe because they're so charismatic and so persuasive and so passionate, and maybe they're exploiting your own personal belief system, but have we believed something about someone at some point that is just not very true? If so, the good news is God is all about helping us turn those belief systems. I have been in situations, not too long ago, I was in a situation where I was talking to somebody and they were having a conflict with a different party, and I know both parties, and I know both parties relatively well, and I deal with people, and I felt comfortable to speak my mind since they were talking to me, and this person had a particular belief system that this other party was pure evil, and they assigned them a very particular motive. And I said to this person, I said, well, listen, you don't have to take my word for it, but take my word for it. That's not true. You're believing something that is shaping your path right now, which is not going to end pretty, on something that's false. And I'm bringing that up. Why am I bringing that up? Because I believe God orchestrated our conversation so that they could be confronted with that bad belief system. They were surrounded by people that just supported them. Yeah, you're right. Yeah, you're right. They're evil. They're evil. They're evil. Go get them. Go get them. Go get them. Nobody's countering that because they haven't surrounded themselves with the right stuff, the right people. And I believe God orchestrated a moment for somebody outside of their circle with a very different perspective, with also a different experience and background, who could say to them, I would be careful. You're believing something that is totally unfounded. And what has happened since then is they have given that some thought. They haven't said to me that I always know right or anything, but they just, well, I've thought about that, and I'm going to back off of that. That's good, because now they're backing off of their aggressive posture towards the person they believed was evil. What am I saying? Make sure that your belief system is open for change, because God may bring a person into your life to get you to look at it differently. Oh, somebody that I always assumed and believed was bad isn't so bad. Or now God can put a publication or some type of statement in front of you. May I suggest opening the Word of God and reading it every day, because God can get you to a passage, a page, a chapter, a verse, a phrase that can change your entire belief system about anything, whether it's men, women, Christians, Jews, you name it. God can help us by giving us Scripture to change our minds. As I said earlier, there is a tsunami of deceit overwhelming everyone today. It's almost unbelievable. I don't know if it's AI. I don't know if it's satanic. I don't know what it is. But listen, America is in big trouble, and we are in America. And right now you are being played. You are being controlled. You are being told lies by every side. You can't believe anyone except one. His name is G-O-D. His name is God. Get into the Word and let that ground you. And all the other stuff you hear, just make sure you're weighing it by the truth of God's Word, asking Him to give you His wisdom and His Spirit. This world's got a lot to offer you. You now can't believe a thing you see. Used to be seeing is believing, right? AI's changed the game. Changed the game. It's crazy, isn't it? I'm not trying to alarm you. I'm trying to help you recognize you might be being lied to. Very possible. Esther 7, we'll be done. The moment has come for this banquet where the queen will finally tell her husband that he has ordered an irreversible execution of none other than his own wife. It's going to be fun. Verse number 1. So the king and Haman came to banquet with Esther the queen, and the king said again unto Esther on the second day of the banquet of wine, what is thy petition, sweetheart? And it shall be granted thee. And what is thy request? And it shall be performed, even to the half of the kingdom. Ladies, I wouldn't try that on your husband. He does not have a whole lot to spare, but good luck. We'll see if TK does it on the way home. Honey, I would like half of the world. Verse 3, then Esther the queen answered and said, If I have found favor in thy sight, O king, and if it please the king, let my life be given me at my petition and my people at my request. For we are sold, I and my people, to be destroyed, to be slain, and to perish. But if we had been sold for bondmen and bondwomen, I had held my tongue, although the enemy could not countervail the king's damage. Then the king Ahasuerus answered and said unto Esther the queen, Who is he, and where is he that durst presume in his heart to do so? Here it comes. Drum roll, this thing is Hollywood ready. And Esther said, The adversary and enemy is this wicked Haman. And then Haman was afraid before the king and the queen. And in verse 7, and the king, arising from the banquet of wine in his wrath, went into the palace garden. Can you just see it? Can you hear it? He slams the napkin down. He shoves the table. All the china, it crashes, and the silverware moves, and he rushes out of the door, and the Secret Service, they follow him, and the queen is left looking at Haman, and Haman looks terrified, white as a ghost, as we know in the rest of the story. He pleads with Esther, falls on the bed, and then the king comes in, and it does not go well for Haman. That's why we call him Hangman. But the point here is, it's beautiful what God did, okay? The king of Persia, 127 provinces, you are the mightiest man in the world. And you just made an executive order that said death to all Jews. Very public. Everyone knows on the 13th day of Adar, they're dead, right? And if you're the king of that stature, did I mention he just was embarrassed by his first wife not too long ago? If you're a king of that stature, you're not changing that order. You are not looking like an incompetent king. You are not looking like a foolish king. You are not looking like you're indecisive. You're not swallowing crow. You are not going to go back on that unless you are in such a perplexing personal scenario that you can't live with yourself not changing it. And you see, God gave him a Jewish wife before he knew it, a woman he adored, a woman he respected, a woman he loved, a woman he wanted to keep because he knew what it was like to be lonely. He then learned the night before this encounter that a Jewish man saved his political career and his life. And then he gets into a scenario where he's looking into the sweet eyes of his wife who made this beautiful banquet, and she's respectfully saying, King, we have been sold. I and my people will be killed. And if we were just going to be sold into slavery, I wouldn't have said anything, even though they couldn't stop you. But I don't know how to. And the king just, everything in him, the blood was boiling, and he said, "Who did this?" And it's that guy, my right-hand man. And he had to leave the table, go into the garden. He had to process that he just fell to this man's deceit. He was sold out by his own right-hand man. He was lied to. He was played the fool in front of everybody. He's now going to look like a fool because of Haman, a man who he respected, a man who he listened to, a man who he cared deeply about. And this man knowingly, seemingly tried to kill my own wife. He needed a moment. And after he processed this perplexing, highly emotional, deeply passionate moment, he came back in and essentially executed this man. His death was shortly thereafter, and then eventually the order be replaced with save the Jews. Well, what does this have to do with me, Pastor? Well, if you're buying what everyone is saying online, or if you're buying what everyone is saying in books, or if you're believing everybody in your circles, and you're subscribing to a belief system because of the loudest voice in the room or the most popular voice in the room, you need God's help to get you out of that. And God, because he is so good and because he is so compassionate, because he is so pitiful towards us and how easily deceived we are, he is willing to help us. But we have to be willing to, in those moments where we are perplexed about being wrong about something, and the pride within us says, well, I'm not going to change my mind because we're afraid of looking foolish or we're afraid of looking bad. We've got to have enough humility to say, I was wrong, and reverse a particular belief system. And for that reason, God often needs to put us in a perplexing situation. Listen now. Where truth is more important than reputation. God knows the human spirit is so insecure. So God often immerses us. Again, he didn't take credit for it, but the spiritual forensics team, they got his DNA all over it. He has to put us in a position where we don't even care about our reputation because the situation is so dramatic, so perplexing that I've got to get this right no matter the consequence, no matter the cost. Wow. If you ever find yourself in such a perplexing situation, my advice to you is leave the table and get into the garden and take a few minutes and look to the heavens and ask God to reveal truth to you and to give you the courage to change your belief system. What I don't recommend is getting mad at the queen for telling you the truth. Haman was the liar. Esther was the truth giver. We all have bad belief systems. Some are small, some are big. If they're bad, we got to change them because they'll lead to bad decisions.